Hey, I'm back with chapter 3. I thought I'd record 2 or 3 chapters today to get a little ahead, maybe. Grab your coffee or tea. It's time for chapter 3 in the Ministry of Ordinary Places. Chapter 3 Speech Therapy for the Common Big Mouth like me. Only a month or so after moving to town, a woman rode up to our house on her bike, passing out flyers for an upcoming neighborhood meeting. She was cheerful without trying too hard, down to earth, helpful, and friendly. I pegged her at somewhere around my age, though she wore the look of an easy youthfulness, like someone who did a lot of yoga or juiced a lot or, I don't know, just generally enjoying life. We chatted for a minute or two, me standing on our little front porch and her a few feet away next to her bike. Just as we were saying goodbye, Corey joined us from inside the house. But before I could introduce him to my new acquaintance, he said a quick, surprised hello to her. She did the same, and then she rode away. It was obvious they'd met previously, and though Corey is the most emotionally composed person I've ever seen, I like to think of myself as keenly discerning. There was a tension in the air. Dying to fill in the gaps, I verbally lunged at him with the second she was out of view. "Do you know her?" His response was a succession of short, bitten words. "Oh, yeah. She used to come into the congressional office." I can't believe I did that. "She used to come into the congressional office all the time." We didn't see eye to eye. Basically, a few years prior, when Corey worked as the district director for our local congressman, a staunchy conservative Republican, Claudia, a liberal-leaning Democrat, had made some visits to the office. Each time the two of them had ended up gridlocked about whatever topic had brought her in. Though they avoided personal attacks, I'm guessing they pegged each other as stubborn, rigid, misguided, maybe even ignorant or naive. As strangers, they were afforded the comfort of clinging to their long-held loyalties with no concern for how they might be felt from a different angle. It's impossible to engage in healthy, productive listening while simultaneously building a competing argument. It's safe to assume Corey hadn't been trying to learn from her, and he certainly didn't try to connect with her in any meaningful way. I suddenly worried we'd set up an enemy camp. How many others were there in this neighborhood? In the past, we lived in communities where most everyone had held virtually the same opinions and views. Listening isn't hard in an echo chamber. It's all just reverb, music to the ears. But here in the city, in life ripe with clashing contexts, history, beliefs, and opinions, I was forced to realize what an actual wreck I am at listening. There's no coasting through conversation anymore, a prospect that thrills me. Yet I'm often more concerned with what I'm about to say than I am with what was just said to me. More often than I'd like to admit, I'm more interested in the sound of my own voice. How does this happen? If we take a step back and evaluate the world we live in, we'll realize that we're deeply embedded in a culture that constantly lunges for the mic. We value making our voices heard and getting our points across. But if our goal is healthy community and loving our neighbors, we need to rethink our approach. Before we can learn from each other, before we can truly grow into the clearer picture of God's good kingdom, we have to fall in love with listening. God created our 5 senses as a way for us to understand our world, and Jesus referred to them often. But as it turns out, talking's not one of them. Only as we engage in the hidden practice of listening do we learn about the struggles of others. Gaining empathy where we once cast judgment. Jesus admonished us to pay close attention to what you hear. The closer you listen, the more understanding you'll be given. I was rocked by the simple clarity of his words. There's no room for interpretation here. He warned us to listen closely to his voice while actively demonstrating a life of attentively listening to those around him. This is the heart of relationship. Though it grows more old-fashioned with every passing digitalized day, once I realized how much work I had to do, I became serious about not only how I was listening, but who I was listening to. I intentionally forged relationships with those I wanted to learn from. And I tried my best to listen more than I spoke, though it's possible my early successes were few. I sought those outside my viewpoints on social media. I read different books, listening with my eyes. Along the same lines, Corey and I attended the Justice Conference, a gathering of people who share a concern for the vulnerable and the oppressed. Sitting far from the glare of the spotlight, I jotted pages of notes, cramming thoughts into the margins, nearly draining my pen. For 2 days, we listened to people of color talk about their experiences in the church and the broader world. For hours on end, our hearts were scorched with the burn of their truth. It was uncomfortable, energizing. They begged us to join our voices with theirs, but before that would even be possible, before we could speak without unintentionally inflicting damage, we had to commit to listening. That meant not just hearing their words, but focusing on our entire beings, attending to what they were saying, heart and soul. Careful, mindful listening was the only possible starting point for a much-needed jolt to our worldview. Perhaps ironically, the evening when we returned home, Silas plucked a question seemingly from the summertime clouds floating over us. "Mama, are you white?" I bristled, my brain thrusting into overdrive, imagining where this question might lead, and quick to deflate any potential discomfort. "Oh yeah, my skin could be called white," I stammered. He studied his arm, already deepening its shade from the short 2 weeks of June under our belts. "Can I be called white-ish? It would be easier to be white." From across the patio, Calvin chimed in. "Yeah, it would be." My oil and water Korean-born sons had landed on a rare point of understanding over what they saw as a shared misfortune, one they knew they would never be able to change. Here's what I wanted to do. I wanted to remind them again how beautiful their skin is. I wanted to tell them how I wish mine wasn't so pale. I wanted to offer easy, churchy platitudes about God's perfect design. I wanted to hush them, to tell them to go run around and get sweaty. I wanted to shut down the intensity of their human experience by filling it with my own wiser words. What mother wouldn't race to cover the tender wounds of personal identity and belonging with the quick-sticking band-aids of "I love you" and "God made you exactly as he did for a reason"? I wanted to be the one with the answers, although I may not have realized it at the time. I wanted them to begin to distrust their feelings and discount their experiences, to shush them back beneath the surface, all in the name of my comfort, to minimize my own fears, and to pretend for a moment I could spare them their own. Instead, I remembered the men, women, and children from the conference we had just returned from, and I listened. I passed them the mic, so to speak, and didn't reach for it until they were finished. I had no simple words of encouragement, no quick fixes, and didn't pretend otherwise. I walked away with a better understanding of who they are and what they face, even within a community known for its inclusivity and heart. I was surer than ever that I would do whatever it took to help create a more peaceful world for my beloved sons and daughter, and for all who are dragged down by the weight of their difference. But this clarity would not have arrived if I had prioritized my own voice with theirs. We change, soften, sharpen, and grow as we gather and listen to those who are not replicas of ourselves and whose experiences are outside of our own. I learned this lesson again and again. So far, I have not outgrown my need for reminders. And yet, when I am reminded, I see there are so many ways to build this practice into everyday life. No wrong way. Not really. First, we have to reimagine ourselves as students of the invisible practice of mindful hearing. We have to reacquaint ourselves with quiet and minimize distractions so that our ears can be trusted. Here's how I try. I make space each day to intentionally choose silence, going about my business without the drone of music, podcasts, or television. I also leave my phone at home whenever possible, particularly on walks. It seems like such an unremarkable choice. We're tempted to dismiss it. There are times I suffer a wave of the lowest grade panic that I'll miss out on capturing a beautiful moment without a camera in my pocket. Yet what I lose in my ability to document the visible, I gain in the audience. That vibrant world that blends so seamlessly into the physical, waiting to be heard. There in the quiet, my place comes alive. It's priceless. Right now, I could rattle off my zip code or even pass along the GPS coordinates of our home, but it wouldn't tell you much. Or I could share the playlist of our summers. There's the tiny, anemic music piped from the ice cream truck that creeps down my street several times a day. From my living room windows, I hear businesswomen and men talking shop on one of their routine walking meetings. There's the whirl of bike tires, the squeak of stroller wheels across the sidewalk, a consoling cadence of motherhood leaking out from the edges of a language I don't understand. Thumping rap and pealing horns punctuate the white noise of tires on asphalt. And if you're listening closely, you'll hear the great whoosh of water dropping from the bucket at the splash pad and onto the squealing pack of suntanned kids. A train whistle blares almost continuously, the audible reminder of who we are and why we're grateful all the same. Big rigs barrel north a street away as scooters and mopeds defy the dehumanizing efforts of a justice system run amok, loyally delivering pushed out neighbors to factory jobs across the town. All the while, cicadas pray at my feet and songbirds teach me to worship. Written into the melody of everyday life, I nod along with Sarah Miles, who wrote, "For me, paradise is a garden, but heaven's a city." Can you hear us? As we hone the skill of tuning into the world we're in, we're better positioned to really begin to hear the people near us. I happen to be stirred into a true melting pot, each of us falling wildly off the map of who the others always thought we were. Single moms, tattooed men, refugees and immigrants, activist liberals, dyed-in-the-wool conservatives, addicts, business owners, undocumented college students on the move. Some are orphans and some might wish they were. Each reveals the face of God, made in His image in order to balance His glory and His goodness around the room and through the streets. I know not all areas are this eclectic. For the first 20 years of my life, I lived in a sweet community of people who appeared to align in most ways. But what I know now, and what my parents and those wiser than me knew all along, is that diversity finds its home in every quiet corner. Unearthing it might require a bit more sleuthing, but there's always someone near who has lived from a different vantage point, and she's the one we'll learn the most from. Her present sketches are long-held ideas about what really matters, forcing us to mine the depths of our discomfort as we dig into who she is and why our lives have crossed. Over the past 2 days, my Benjamin Moore white dove walls have heard more F-bombs than in the preceding 4 years combined. There was a time I would have covered my ears, shamed it, and shooed it away. Now I'm learning that this is the language of pain, the lyric of oppression. Bearing the burden of a wounded brother means letting heavy words fall lightly in my heart, and sometimes even in my home. Over the same 2 days, I've also heard a screaming match between 2 of my kids and recognized it as an invitation to fuse their angst with truth. I listened closely as a friend shared with me about a new job opportunity and the anxieties of jumping the tracks into a future she hadn't planned. I listened as a woman recently released from jail offered the children's sermon on Sunday. Devote yourselves to prayer with an alert mind and a thankful heart, she shared. Paul's words spoken through this unassuming missionary are still moving through me like a straight line wind. Eugene Patterson wrote of our need to listen and wait, attend and adore. We unite as we listen, yielding the floor to another. We pay attention, fully present, with our lips aren't moving and our minds are alert. I'm stunned by the richness of discussion this posture invites. I'm swept away by the freedom found in viewing people not as teammates or rivals, but rather as friends and brothers. 5 years after running into Claudia that first time, I now consider her a friend. Corey does as well. Over cups of coffee, the 2 of them got to know each other as neighbors rather than political opponents. I can't speak for her, but as time goes on and our dialogue spans years, we're learning from her. She is graciously, with tremendous kindness and thoughtfulness, leading us to see from a new perspective. Last year, she won my enthusiastic vote in her bid in a state election as a newly elected official when she ran into a situation that pertained to incarceration rights. She enlisted Corey's help. The 2 of them worked together for the good of our community. We've traded book recommendations and Netflix show reviews. We've grabbed dinner one night with her and her husband and stayed out too late because there was just so much ground to cover. Listening is a form of spiritual hospitality by which you invite strangers to become friends, wrote Henny Newen. Rather than spending all our time with those whose life mirrors ours so closely that all conversation distills into small talk, we are invited to widen our circle and hush our mouths. Do we dare imagine the possibilities? What if 1 year from now you were part of a book club where you were the youngest in attendance by decades? What if you found your way into a group of women who differed from you socioeconomically on either end of the spectrum, resisting the urge to believe you didn't belong among them, and instead nurturing a surprising, genuine friendship? What if you showed up at church across town, pastored by a man or woman of color, then dutifully stuck around. I recently came upon Silas belting out a song with confidence that belied the actual performance. Joyful, joyful, we of Dorothy, God of Florida, Lord above. For the rest of my days, I won't be able to hear that song without grinning. We will continue to get things wrong, reality warping against our unique experience, our vision for the future, and the decibel level of our lives at any given moment. Listening well doesn't come naturally to any of us. It takes work. And most of our slips along the way will be nowhere as adorable as his. But we aren't too old and rusty to learn something new, and it's never too late. Open your windows. Turn off your phone. Walk the back alleys of your neighborhood. You live in the country? The suburbs? It might require a drive up the road, that's all. Go wherever life thrums and pops, the place common sense most loudly warns you to avoid. Go there. Sit down. Lean in. Resist the urge to posture or interject. Listen without an agenda. Just wait and see where it takes you. That's the end of chapter 3.